Hello, so this is the second part of my Nextcloud Raspberry Pi server build. Just to answer a couple of questions that I've had with regards to follow-up configurations. So everything's up and running and it looks really good, really happy with it, as are my family members who I've given access to our photo repository. So you can see here that along with the default folders, I've created one for family videos, one for family photos, and a backup for my daughter. And these are created at the top level, and I have shared them with the various users that I have created. Each of the users are configured to either have read or write permissions or not. So these two users here can only view and reshare the information within the folders, which is good. I did try to use an app, probably trying to make things too complicated. That was the File Access Control app. I would say don't use this because it looks like it's causing problems when sharing folders with various Google searches that I've done, up to the point where people are having to rebuild their NASes. So I took that off and I'm just using user access controls via sharing. So what have I done since the last video? A couple of security and setup warnings that I had. Those were a few configurations, plus they recommended configuring redis for caching, which I've done. I'm not sure whether it's working or not, but it looks like redis is running and the performance is fairly good. I've also migrated to Postgres because I wanted to actually use this NAS as a Postgres server as well. So as well as upgrading to Postgres, I've moved Postgres onto the second SSD. So the files themselves for Nextcloud are being shared on one SSD. Postgres is running on the other, and I'm hoping that will also improve performance. One thing I noticed this morning when I went into the system settings and the overview, it was telling me that the cron, the background jobs weren't running. So I did a quick search and enabled the cron. Let me just log in to the server so I can show you what I've done. And I did type that password correctly, which is a minor miracle. This is actually the second attempt at putting this video together. I was having problems with my audio. So one of the other things I did actually was to create some aliases. I found I was moving around quite a lot. So I created these aliases here to navigate to the conf directory, to the base data directory, and actually into the files as well, and NC home, Nextcloud home, which still resides var www.html. So there was that, and if I just do a quick history, you should be able to see cron tab -L on the www-data, and that shows us here that using cron to automate every 5 minutes, this file, this cron.php, which already exists as the default in the default installation, should be run every 5 minutes. Okay, so let's just clear that. Okay, so to migrate to Postgres, I used the documentation for Nextcloud, and also this documentation here, this link, to do a move of the database to a different location. So it's just creating a user, setting some PostgreSQL Conf configurations. That the main one there is to actually enable remote access through port 5342 into the server. So without making the configuration options there, you can't actually see anything running on port 5432. You can't access the server. And if you're managing your server with pgadmin, then you need to do that in order to manage the server. So I can manage the server remotely from my laptop using pgadmin because I've got that port open. And here's another note here. We've already talked about that, haven't we? File access control. Avoid that app unless you really need that extra access control list type level of access. So I moved the default storage location as well. So that is well, as part of the instructions that we talked about in the last video, actually. So that's good. Yes. So port forwarding. The port forwarding itself is actually done on the your hub, your router, your main router. So I'm logged into my router here, and you can see the port forwarding rule that I've set up. So this is the IP address, my internal IP address of my NAS, and I've only opened 443, only the SSL port range for both protocols. So that's TCP and UDP, and that's it. So when it actually comes to the configuration on NAS, on the Nextcloud, this is my config.php. I've made a copy of it here so that I could hide some of the external IP and subdomain information as well. So there's not much different in here from the standard installation apart from, well, no, it's a lie actually, there's quite a lot different. So the data directory, because I've changed it, now resides on my SSD in a Nextcloud folder, data. I've got my database version here for Postgres, my Postgres information. I've got my redis information here, which took a bit of fiddling to get right because there were a few conflicting websites out there, // and single backslashes, and all the information held in this array type format here and not. So this is the one that it didn't error. I don't know whether Redis is working correctly. I don't know how to check Redis is working correctly. But lots of configurations that I tried refuse, the Nextcloud refused to start, and it was coming up with an error. Whenever you're doing these types of modifications, you have to change this from false to true, the maintenance mode. So always make sure you set that back to false at the end of it. And then at the end here, we've got my database name information. So this is my login information for the Postgres database. Interestingly, the DB password here is in clear text. Obviously, I've changed it here. Okay, so this bit here is the port forwarding. So in trusted domains, initially you have your local host. Then I put in my external IP address, the IP address to which I face the world from my router, so my public IP address. And then I put an entry in for my subdomain that I created on my website. And this redirects to https :/ public IP address, this one, and then / Nextcloud, so that my friends and family just need to type in the subdomain and they're redirected to the login page of Nextcloud. And that is everything in the config.php. With regards to setting up SSL, this is in response to Martin's question that I got on my first video. I only followed the instructions on the website that we already previously talked about. So all of the settings here, setting up SSL for Nextcloud. I followed this to the T. I made sure that I filled in this information here, and this is propagated into the certificate, which is showing as invalid, which you will know because it's self-signed. All the details that are configured here are obviously viewable because we've configured them at this step. If we take a look at the sites available information here, so if I cat the default conf file and show you that, this is the rewrite engine, rewrite condition that forces HTTP to go to HTTPS. So nothing groundbreaking in there. And then the default SSL conf is, I think the only line that I changed in here was SSL engine on, which might have actually been done when we've switched SSL on for Apache anyway. I can't remember whether I manually edited that file or not. The final file that's in this directory, nextcloud.conf, I think I can actually remove. I only put this in here when I was trying to resolve issues with the file access or the access control app. So I believe this can be removed. These path names are actually wrong anyway. So I need to just do an investigation to see whether this adds any benefit or not. But I think it's all working anyway, so I think we're good. So yeah, that's it. I've also configured the Windows app, so it does some backups of a folder that I've configured. That was easy enough to set up. And I've also configured the Android app to back up my WhatsApp messages, images and video, not messages, just images and video. So that's quite nice as well. Let me just make sure I covered everything. Yeah, we talked about SSL port forwarding, access control, file access control, avoid that app, I believe. And that is it. So yeah, if you have any further questions or want to know any specific configurations, please let me know. Thanks.